Hey guys, how's it going? Bored now back with you, aka Keith, and this is my sort of the first movie review I've done for I think at least a couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, so sorry about that. I'll try and make these reviews of movies a bit more frequent, try and get another one out during the week. Of course, TV is sort of taking over my schedule at the moment, as is the way. And of course, I'll be making up for this in October because I'll have lots and lots of horror film reviews during October. I'll be cramming in as many horror films as I can and then reviewing them for you on this channel. And I also have some live streams planned as well. I'll probably put up a video pre the start of October, sort of laying things out for you, but yeah, I'm gonna get as close to 31 movies in as I can, if not at least 31. I won't make promises, but I do have a big old list I've put together. And as well as the videos with reviews on, I will also be doing some live streams, fitting a few of those in October. So I can sort of mention them now. I'm sort of planning on doing a double bill of Chucky movies. So I was thinking Bride of Chucky and also Cult of Chucky, the most recent Chucky film in that continuity, if you like, in that universe. Of course, the recent film is more of a reboot, but anyway. And that's another one I'll try and fit in maybe for October because I've not seen the recent Child's Play yet. But yeah, a double bill of Bride and Chucky, Cult of Chucky. That'll be one of the streams. I'm also planning on watching Nightmare on Elm Street 4 on another one, and also Phenomena, the Dario Argento classic. So a few live streams during the month to go along with the regular review video. So really busy in October movie wise. It is of course Christmas for horror fans, so a month long thing where you should be getting at least a video per day, fingers crossed. So that's the plan. So I guess it's fitting then I'm going to be reviewing a horror movie on this episode. It is Hellfest, which came out in 2018, so a recent horror movie, a recent slasher. It came out, I'm guessing, around about October last year. It feels like the sort of film that would be released in October. I certainly remember it coming out and hearing reviews of it, and I think it was around this time last year, around about October. So anyway, I thought I'd catch up with it since it's on Netflix in the UK, so that means anyone watching this in the UK can catch up with it on Netflix. And I'll go into some spoilers, but before I do that, I'll give you the setup and some of the details. So this is directed by Gregory Plotkin, who I've never heard of. And it's worth noting one of the producers for the film is Gail Ann Hurd. And she, in case you don't recognise the name, famously was involved in the script for the original Terminator. Her and James Cameron credited, but I think she kind of gets a lot of the credit for the quality of that original Terminator in terms of the script, because it is a really tight sort of script. And a big part of why the film works so well is the script, I think. So there's sort of an underappreciation, I think, for her involvement in that film and the script. So yeah, I'm pretty sure she doesn't script T2, which may be one of the reasons why it's not as good. It's still good, don't get me wrong, before people start hating me in the comments. It's a really good sequel, but yeah, it's not as well scripted as the first film. It doesn't quite have that sort of tight structure, and I think there are flaws in the story of that second film. It does get a little bit baggy, so it's sort of without her touch on the script level. I think that you can certainly look at that. But she's a producer here, and well, without pre giving away my thoughts, she maybe could have been used as a scriptwriter as well on this. But she's just a producer. Now, some of the cast, they're pretty much unknowns. I think some of them have popped up on TV. So you have the main girl who's oh, Amy. So I couldn't read my writing there. Amy Forsyth. She's playing the lead girl, Natalie, and then you have Rain Edwards playing her sort of best friend, Brooke, who's kind of the more kind of out there sexually sort of one, the more kind of. I mean, she's meant to be likable enough, but yeah, she's the one who's playing the bit more raunchy, fun-loving type one. Well, that's the idea. You have Bex Taylor Class as their sort of friend Taylor, who's also along for the ride. She kind of ticks off another box in a way. Tony Todd has a cameo. Of course, he's famous for Candyman, which is a bit of a classic from the early 90s, and he has a very small role, a one-scene role, but he's the sort of actor who has appeared in a lot of horror movies post Candyman, and kind of this sort of film, which is a very low budget film, tends to use him for, because they think his name will draw in a bigger sort of audience. His name on the poster has a credibility with a certain horror crowd, and he's a really fine actor, it's worth saying. And also, I guess we also have, if I can find his name, yes, we have Rob Attle, who plays Gavin, who essentially is he's the, is that Rob? Yeah, I think it's, oh, sorry, Roby. Roby's name is Roby Attle. He plays Gavin, who essentially is the love interest for Natalie, the main gal. Kind of, she's into him, and he happens to be going to this Hellfest event, and yeah, he's the love interest for Natalie. So it's a very simple plot setup, really. You have this group of friends, and at the start of the film, Natalie is just looking for a casual weekend. She just wants to relax and hang out at home, and Brooke's like her roommate or her best friend, whichever one it is, and she slowly wears her down and encourages her to go with her to this thing called Hellfest, which may or may not be based on real things. I mean, I can certainly imagine it coming from something real. So it's basically a horror themed festival, so almost like a theme park type thing, but with all horror themed rides, and you get characters popping up. So you have people dressed in horror get up and scaring people. So it's a whole thing, it's a whole like theme park but dedicated to like horror type thing. And Brooke wants to go with like her boyfriend and in this group, so she sort of talks Natalie into going, and she does it partly because she tells him that then Gavin's going to be there, so it's a chance for them to hang out and maybe hook up. And Natalie is quite shy and not too sure, but she does like Gavin, so she goes along and starts enjoying it eventually after a slow start. But lo and behold, this is a horror movie, so there has to be sinister stuff lurking around the corner. And as it turned out, basically you have like killers in the theme park. So you have people dressed as these characters. It's meant to be part of the show, but it turns out they are slowly starting to kill people for real, for whatever reason. I don't think we're actually given that much of a reason. It's a bit of a sicko, and I mean, at the end of the very end, we sort of see. We get a bit more of an insight maybe into it, but just it's never fully explained why they're sort of doing this or who's behind it exactly. But yeah, it's a very basic horror setup. So these teens who are, I think meant to be quite annoying, to be honest, go along to this theme park. They start having fun, but then, yeah, these killers are let loose on them, and they have to try and survive. And there's some bloodshed along the way. So I've probably already indicated my feelings overall, and I didn't like it. I thought it was pretty tedious. The characters, I'll go through this. I mean, the characters were very annoying from the start, really. I thought first of all, they were very bland. There was very little to make any of them stand out, and that includes Natalie, even though she's kind of meant to be playing the kind of likable one and the girl who you're kind of gonna root for by the end, so like the final girl. But they don't even make her that likable, which just makes her sort of blur in a bit more with the others, and that's really weird. You would have thought with the others being quite similar, they would have played up that side of her character a bit more. And so she's not that likable. She's kind of fine, but they don't make her likable enough. And the characters are just like real cliches, really cardboard cutouts, and I didn't totally believe that they exist, if you like, which not a huge problem, but I think the bottom line is they're just not very interesting. Their dialogue's really annoying, and there's no chemistry. That's part of the problem. You don't really believe that these are friends. You don't believe in their sort of group dynamic, and I think that's a big thing in this sort of film, because if you think of like the original Halloween, you do believe in like the teens in that. You believe in them individually, and you believe that they are a group of friends. You can sort of imagine that. And with this, it's either then you don't imagine it, or certainly there's no chemistry there, which is a big problem, because you spend a lot of time with these characters and with them as a group, and yeah, the characters don't stand out at all. They're very unremarkable. They're not very likable or interesting, and yeah, as a group they don't really gel, so that's another problem. And I think there's a problem where I think they're meant to be unlikable, and I think that's setting you up for the horror aspect. And obviously, it's fair to say a certain amount of them do get killed, and there are other victims. And I think you could imagine that would be the case, but in any case, I mean, even if they are meant to be unlikable and you're meant to enjoy watching them put through this torture, the problem is they're not really unlikable in an entertaining sort of way. It's not like when you watch some of like the Friday the 13th series of films, where you do enjoy that just as a cheesy, silly slasher. And some of the characters of that are so over the top and so cheesy, then you actually have fun with them. They're essentially shallow, some of them, but the film makes it fun, sort of thing. But with these characters, they just grate on, or they grated on me from the word go. And the other thing is the acting is just really bad. It's really amateurish. None of the performances really stand out, and they're all very. They all seem to have the same couple of expressions, and they're really bland actors. So yeah, the human characters are really annoying. I think, and then you have the horror aspect, which doesn't really work at all. I think, to be fair, there's a couple of decent kills. I think there's the what I mean. I'll go into spoilers now, but Gavin is kind of the first major victim, or he's like the first one of the group of the main characters who get killed. And his actual death is quite well done. His sort of head is like sort of smashed with like one of those fairground sort of and that's a good scrungy sort of kills. It's decent. I've seen it done better in other horror movies, but it's a decent enough kill. It's a good sort of practical effect. And that's something they do in this film because it's a really low budget film. I mean, not low, but it cost around 5 million, which nowadays is pretty low budget, even for a horror movie. But that's quite a good scrungy effect. But I think the problem with that kill is just that it's such a ponderous build up to it, and the plot is just so contrived. The writing of the story and characters is really bad. So he basically has started, gelling with Natalie. They've started bonding and they're having a good time together. And so what happens is, in a previous scene, he's trying to win this toy for her, one of those cuddly toys on one of those like games they have at the fairground. And he doesn't win it for her, it's like one of the things where you throw the thing. And what happened is, so later on when they're starting to click and, you get the sense and they're gonna like get together. I think they've already kissed at this point, in fact. He decides to go back and get her the toy. He basically has this idea to bribe the guy at the game, because things are going well. He wants to do this for her, and so what happens is the others are going on this like big ride sort of thing. It's like I'm pretty sure it's similar to like a ghost house sort of thing, haunted house type ride. So he insists, and they go on without him, and he'll catch up, and he doesn't obviously tell Natalie why, but the reason is because he wants to buy this toy for her and surprise her. And so you kind of get cut in between the two scenes where Natalie's, the longer it goes without him returning, she's kind of worried and freaking out, to the point where one of them in the end has to tell her, he didn't want me to tell you, but he's gonna buy you the toy sort of thing, the cuddly toy. So that obviously cheers her up, reassures her, but basically him going off to get this cuddly toy, which in the end he doesn't get. The guy's sort of a jerk about it, says, no, sorry, I can't do that, you have to win it in the game. But basically this sidetracks him and gets him lost and gets him essentially killed by one of the killers with the hammer, as I said. So the trouble is then it's a bit convoluted, the lead up to that, and there's nothing really invested in any of the characters, so it's not like the stakes are that high anyway. As I said, the kill itself is decent enough, but it's it's whatever. I didn't really care that much anyway, even though the payoff was pretty. So there's a couple of decent kills along the way. There's a kill quite late on in the film where they do like the sort of magic trick, the sort of the one with the I'm forgetting, the guillotine sort of thing with the head, and when it's for show sort of thing. Because what sort of happens is, and after a while, once they've cottoned on to the fact that something isn't right and that people are being killed, because it's kind of a running gag throughout, then they see people kind of get killed, and they are being killed for real, but they just assume it's part of the show sort of thing. But eventually they cotton on to what's going on. So Taylor she's pulled up on stage for this, and at this point Natalie is really freaking out because she knows what's going on. And the Taylor thing on the guillotine looks very real, but essentially it is fake, and they drag her backstage, even though Natalie's convinced it was real. And then it's backstage where they finally kill Taylor, and that kill's quite good as well. They're not all good, and they're decent. I'm not saying they're great kills, but they're decent enough kills. A couple of them, couple of nice practical effects. But yeah, just the pacing and the writing. Even at 90 minutes, this film felt overlong and dragged out, and the direction's really bad. It just doesn't really flow together. And it's just really boring. I mean, I think it's lucky it's only 90 minutes because it really would have dragged otherwise. And it's neither entertaining enough in a cheesy way, or it's not funny enough. But on the other hand, the horror moments don't really add up to much. So you're left with a pretty forgettable movie, really, with some annoying characters and bad acting. It sort of feels like you're sort of trapped inside like one of these horrible like drinking sort of emo type festivals. It's a bit of a nightmare being around these characters, to be fair. And the horror element just isn't very interesting. I mean, because you have these killers who are in hoods sort of thing most of the time and disguises, you never really get to see much of them. And I know a lot of times that's a good thing in a horror movie, but the problem is you never do at any stage. That's just the whole thing of the movie, the fact that they happen to be killers, and so they sort of strike at unexpected times. And although it is predictable, I mean, that's part of the thing with the Gavin kill, is the fact then you see it coming, because as soon as he goes off to buy her the toy, you know he's going to get sidetracked. You know he's probably going to be the next victim. And it's so telegraphed. It's so contrived, the way they just come up with that convenient excuse for him to be separated from the rest of the group. And it's telegraphed. You know from that moment he's going to be killed. And in a really good horror movie, you know, the kills and when they're going to come shouldn't be predictable. So there's a lot of convoluted plotting and build up which just doesn't add any tension at all. So there's nothing really threatening about the killers, nothing intimidating about them. The kills are hit and miss. As I said, some decent ones, some pretty forgettable. There's this really dumb scene in the bathroom quite late in the film. So Brooke and Natalie have gone. And I mean, at this point, I think, apart from Taylor, who dies nearer the end in that guillotine scene, I think that's like right after this scene. Apart from her, I think the rest of their friends have been killed, and there's been one or two other victims around the fairground. But at one point, obviously at the stage where Natalie's convinced that something's wrong, her and Brooke go to the bathroom and they start talking things out. And they start talking about Spain, because apparently they've always wanted to go on a holiday to Spain. And it becomes a thing where they say, well, we'll do that after this, then we'll do it whenever, I think during the summer or whenever it's going to be. So they make those plans. But then there's a scene where Brooke goes, or not a scene, but then Brooke goes off and Natalie goes into the toilet to go toilet, and suddenly like a potential killer. I can't remember exactly how it plays out, but he shows up outside the door and he's just standing there for ages. And there's a scene before, or there's a bit before that, when Natalie's like drying her hair on the thing, and she just stands there for ages, barely moving, blowing her hair, and he's right next to her, and I mean, obviously it's a fake out because he doesn't do anything, and I mean, who knows? It could have just been one of the guys, but one of like the regular performers, but. It's so stupid. It doesn't do anything. And then, as I said, she goes. Why didn't she go to the toilet in the first place? Her and Brooke have been in there chatting for like 2 minutes or something. Surely going to the toilet would have been the first thing she did when she got in there. But oh no, that's too logical for this film. She randomly goes to the toilet after Brooke's left, of course, because that means she's alone then. What was I thinking, guys? So then suddenly he appears outside the toilet and he's just there for a while, and he eventually goes after her and she manages to escape. But it's such a contrived scene again. It's so stupid. And then actually I do enjoy the cameo from like this guy playing the cop, or like the security at the fairground who they start. Natalie's obviously freaking out at this point. This is what confirms to her the fact that yeah, there are killers on the loose in this fairground. So she tries to get this security guy to believe her, and he's obviously, well, there's no real proof sort of thing, and they go around scaring people. Well, that's their job. I can't really arrest them for doing it. So he's being a bit of a douche, but it's quite an entertaining cameo from this guy. I think I read he was like a stand-up comedian or something from that. So he's quite a cool little like movie sort of douchey security type guy who's quite sarcastic. So I quite enjoyed his part. Certainly one of the standout characters. And someone who doesn't stand out, sadly, is Tony Todd. As I said, he gets used a lot in these sorts of slasher type films, and he is completely wasted. He's in that one scene, so involved in like the guillotine. I can't remember. I think he's like the master of ceremonies or something, and that's it. That's all you see of him. I mean, he could have been a much better like villain or monster than the guys they got. So another film that's guilty of wasted. The great Tony Todd. Disgraceful. Absolutely horrendous. And yeah, as I said, there's a lot of plodding scenes. It's directed really badly, so not only is it badly written, but there's no suspense. So there's a long, like, the scene on the ghost train, for example, where they do quite a lot of making you believe something's going to happen. And it's a really long-winded scene. Again, it's sort of badly directed. And this is one of those movies where it's just so low rent, but it's low rent in a bad way. It's not low rent in a really exciting, edgy horror, what horror can be sort of way. It's just low rent and dingy sort of thing. It's got this really ugly look to it, and just a bland look. It's not like really interesting or really shot in quite an exciting DIY way. It's just very bog standard, very bland looking, not very interesting at all. It's really kind of dull, which I think is one of the worst things you can say about a film. Now, the final scene is quite interesting because, I mean, first of all, I will say about it that it does look like that they were going for a sort of a feminist like twist to it, where the two main girls, so Brooke and Natalie, they do end up surviving. So there's like this big last trace scene with them when they're trying to escape the theme park, and the main kill. So there's 2 or 3 main killers, but there's one particular guy, and so he's after them and they're after them, and to be fair to the film, you do have the girls being proactive in this scene. You do have them fighting back and actually using their intelligence. So if there's a scene where those characters come alive, it is this scene. As I said, it does make them a bit tougher, and it at least pays some of it off, So they do survive. They kill one of the guys, I think, and they eventually escape and survive. So you do actually see them having a bit more to them than we've seen previously in the film. So I'll give even though it's not a particularly memorable scene, I'll give the film the fact that they did put a bit of a feminist twist, the fact that the girls survive and they end up being quite tough at the end. But then the sort of twist is then they don't catch the main guy, they can't find him when the police are called, and at that point it's clear then, even to the police, then they're telling the truth, because one of them gets injured and there are witnesses as well. But as it turns out, they can't find the main guy. He's escaped. And the very ending, I think, is setting up the possibility of a sequel. So it ends with him basically going home to his daughter. So it's one of those twists where it's meant to be shocking, because it's like, oh, he's actually just this regular guy who's got a daughter, and she obviously doesn't know about his double life and what he's doing. So it's one of those where it's meant to make it more scary. It's a bit like how sometimes you find out that serial killers they have this double life where they're like family guys, or they have a family, and that makes them sort of a bit more scary, or even more scary, let's say, because it's this idea of, if they're just sort of weirdos and they're recluse and what have you can at least understand that, or you think, well, that makes sense, sort of thing. But the fact that this guy is actually a father to a daughter and that sort of thing, in theory, would make him more scary. But as I said, he's a weak villain, so you never get to know him enough, and he's just not very interesting, because a lot of the film is just him running around in this disguise and there's no presence. So the ending is quite nice. It's quite a nice idea, the fact that he escapes and goes home and has this daughter. It's quite a nice twist, but I mean, if you got to know him a bit more, and if he stood out more as a threat throughout the film, it would have landed more. And it also feels a bit lame, because it's them just doing that kind of twist where, because they're hoping for a sequel, basically. It happens a lot nowadays where the main guy, the main killer, actually survives, and then they set up a sequel. Whether this will get a sequel, I'm not sure. I mean, it made a decent amount of money considering the budget, but it made about 18 million, but whether the studio will feel that's enough, or whether there's an idea for a second film, who knows. But yeah, clearly that end, I think, is meant to leave it open for a sequel anyway. But yeah, I certainly don't want one, because this sucked pretty much. And I've seen worse. I mean, I'm probably over-egging it for the review. I've seen much, much worse. It's just very bland, but as a horror movie, it very rarely works. There's a couple of good scenes, and that's about it. And I think it makes it worse than the characters are so annoying and the acting so bad. So I pretty much thought it sucked. I've seen much worse, but pretty awful. So now to the rating. I'm going to give it a 3 out of 10. So it's not quite the bottom of the barrel. There are much worse films, but I think I can't go higher than a 3, because you're talking a couple of good scenes in a 90-minute movie, and it just doesn't succeed in what it sets out to do. It's not entertaining. The characters are really bland, and it doesn't work on a horror level. It's not scary. It's very boring to watch. So no, very unoriginal as well. I really didn't like it. So that's my review of Hellfest, and as I said, I'll be getting to many more horror movies in the coming weeks for October, so I hope you can join me for some of that on the channel. And before then, I will try and fit in another horror review and a new release, and that is Ready or Not, which I know is coming out this week. I think it comes out on Wednesday, so I'm going to try and see that and review that for the channel. But that's been my review of Hellfest. Let me know your thoughts on the film in the comments below. Let me know if you disagree with me, if you actually like the film. But yeah, let me know your thoughts, and I'll see you guys soon. Goodbye.